Hi, this is Elizabeth with Felted Sky, here with the instructions for our Gnomes needle felting kit in our Sculpting with Wool series of kits. So let's go ahead and open up the box and talk about what's inside. So here we have the instruction sheet and our beginner's guide to needle felting. So this is just some nice general information if you're new to felting that I recommend you read before getting started. So hopefully that will be helpful to you. And then in the instruction sheet, there's just one thing that I want to point out. So this extra set of numbers next to each step, that is the time stamp for the video. So you could fast forward or rewind and find a spot that you want to go to in the video very quickly and easily. Just use that time stamp. Alright, so in the kit we have two types of wool. This is our Felter's Core wool. So we're going to use that for the shaping of the gnomes. That's the bulk of the wool that we need. And then we'll put our pretty colors on the outside. So this is our Felter's palette. It's a solid colored wool batting. So you'll just want to unroll that before we get started and also unfold the edges, and that will have your wool ready to use. So you may also want to keep a little piece with the label or just kind of note what color it is as you take it out. We will be referring to those color names in the instruction sheet and in the video. Or if you want to reorder some of these later, you would know which ones you have. Alright, so I'll move that out of the way, and then here we have the needles in their cute little paper tube. So in this kit you get two black needles, which are the 36 triangle, and also two yellow needles, which are the 40 triangle. So you can refer to the back of the tube to see what you have, if you need to reorder, etc. So just a little bit about how I recommend holding the needle. So I actually don't recommend holding with 2 fingers at the top like that, or even with 3 fingers at the very top. Instead, I like to put the top of the needle in kind of the crook of my pointer finger, and then hold lower on the needle with my thumb and middle finger, like that. And then some people also like to put their ring finger down there, even lower on the needle. So you'll be poking like this, and hopefully that would be a comfortable and efficient needle grip for you. It allows you to be a little more effective with using your needle, and hopefully keep it going straight in and straight out and have less needle breakage. Breaking needles does happen though, usually when you're new to needle felting, sometimes. So you'll also need a mat to complete this project. This is our Felter's foam mat, so any foam mat will work for this, and this is a nice firm foam, very economical but not as long lasting, so not as eco-friendly. So now we also have the option of a burlap mat. So this is the one I've been using the most when I'm sculpting. I really like it for that. It's 2 layers of burlap and then filled with rice. So kind of like a big rice-filled pillow. And of course more eco-friendly, being natural material and fairly long-lasting, quite a while. So the last option for a mat is a wool mat. So this is 100% wool. This is the one we make here at Felted Sky. It's kind of just a big slab of wet felted wool. I like this the best for my flat projects, but you can also sculpt on it and it will work just fine. This is of course eco-friendly, being wool, and very, very long lasting. So that is the other option for a mat. And then I also just want to mention one thing here about tool. So if you want to have a tool for this project, it does help some of it go a little bit faster. This is the one that I reach for a project of this size. This is the Clover tool with 3 needles, and this works very nicely and is not necessary for this project, but does just help some of the sculpting go faster. So here's what it looks like if you want to see if your local store has that, or of course we carry it, or you can find it other places online. Alright, so now that we've talked about all that, I think we're ready to get started. So the first thing you'll want to do is get out your core wool. So here's the roll of core wool. I'm going to just unfold this and then we'll be ready to use it. So your piece might be a different size, but as long as you can get 3 strips out of it. So we're going to go in, the width of each strip is going to become the height of the gnome. So this gnome is about that tall, so I want to do a strip for it that is about, for him, that is about like this. So I'm going to go ahead and tear that strip off, set it aside, and then we want to have a little bit of a shorter gnome. So we need to have a strip that's not as wide as the first one, so a little bit narrower of a strip. So I'll tear this one off, set that aside, and then what's left is hopefully going to be your tallest gnome, so your widest strip. And again, if you have a different size of your core wool and your strips are not exactly the same, we just want them to be slightly different widths so that our gnomes will all come out a little bit differently and have their own personality. So now I'm going to just start rolling. So I'm rolling towards me and making a roll which will become the gnome. So this would be the smallest one. Once it's felted and compact, that would be the smallest gnome. And then this would be the middle-sized one, so a little bit taller and a little more round, or around the middle perhaps, kind of a stocky gnome. So there's that one, and then we have the tallest gnome, so the widest strip. Yeah, I'm just trying to decide what the bottom is going to be, make sure I put enough wool close to the bottom so he will stand well. So there's what that one looks like. And again, yours don't have to look exactly like mine. These gnomes all have their own little personalities, and they all come out looking very cute and fun, kind of no matter how you do them. You can make them your own and give them their own little personalities. Alright, so then we're going to get out the mat. I'm just flattening out my rice here. And then we can start felting. So I'm picking the end that's going to be the bottom. And we're going to start stabbing into the bottom with our black needle. So the black needle, and just start poking. So you can kind of take the needle and help to fold those layers of wool in towards the center. And then we're just stabbing straight in, and that's going to flatten out the bottom. You see I'm going fairly deep into the wool, so you want to stab vigorously at this point to start the shaping. You can already see it's starting to flatten out more there. And that's compacting the wool. And now I'm going to stab on the side a little bit to keep my roll together. So that's where the end was. So I'm going to poke into that. So the needle has the tiny microscopic barbs, or not microscopic, but the needle has tiny barbs on the end, and it's the wool fibers that have microscopic scales on them. So the needle is tangling those together, and that's what's doing the felting, is that action of the needle. And now we'll go back to the bottom. So you can see I'm just shaping gradually. I want to get all parts, but shape gradually. So you can kind of run into trouble if you do too much felting on one part before you have done enough on the rest of it. So if you go gradually, you can generally fix any mistakes before they become mistakes. You don't need to do much to the top there that I was pointing out. And here I'm going to stab in from the other side. So whichever way your needle is going, that's the way the wool is going to move. So I'm wanting to keep the middle round, so I'm stabbing with the needle going towards the center of the gnome to kind of push some of that wool down that direction. Here we've sped up the video, and you can just see as I am continuing to shape but we'll get it done faster here for the video. So I'll do a little bit to the top, but that's where the hat is going to go, so we don't have to do a whole lot there. And then I always go back to the bottom, make sure that's staying compacted and flattened out. And if you do have a tool, you can use that. So this is what it would look like if you're using the tool. And you'll see that this does flatten that bottom out very quickly and easily with those 3 needles. So I do reach for this tool some of the time, but these gnomes are a fairly fast project in terms of needle felting projects, so even if you don't have the tool, it's not a big deal. You can see even with the tool I'm going in at the same angles that I was trying to go in with the single needle. So at this point I'm pushing wool up towards the middle from the bottom. And here we'll speed this up a bit. And I'm back to my single needle. So when I'm poking down from the top, kind of going all over those sides. And we're getting a good shape. You just continue until it's kind of firm, and we can do a stand test. So yes, it's standing pretty straight. If it's not standing straight, you just need to work on your bottom more and try and make that as flat as possible. Alright, this is the point where we can go ahead and put on our colored wool. So this is ivy, and I'm just going to wrap my piece of ivy around and then tear off the extra. So we want just a little bit of an overlap so that none of that core wool is going to show through. And then we'll need to add a little piece to the bottom if you didn't have any covering the bottom there. So now we're going to poke this with our yellow needle. So the yellow is more for finishing. I don't use it as much for the general shaping and sculpting, but this is going to be what we use for the finishing that's going to make the surface a little bit smoother. Doesn't have quite the size puncture holes of the black needle. It's going to firm up the surface and work well for finishing our gnome. So here I saw that there was still core wool showing through, so I'm just adding another piece of ivy. So it's very easy to fix any mistakes or add on. Just tear off another piece of wool, and once it's poked in, you won't even see where you added that on. So now I'm just going to poke all over the whole thing again with the yellow needle. I'm not stabbing in as far now, so I'm staying closer to the surface, and I just want to get all of this green wool attached very nicely. And so we don't want it to be fluffy anymore. We want to poke it until it seems very well attached and flattened out and not fuzzy. And you will still see puncture holes. That's just part of needle felting, but with the yellow needle, they will be a little less than with the black needle. You can see I'm just going over the whole thing again, turning and poking, and then turning and poking some more. Going over the whole thing with my yellow needle. Again, we don't need to stab in as far now. This is more about the surface because we already have our general shape well established. I'm going to do some more up here. Back and forth, up and down, turning and poking. So it does take a while, but hopefully your end result will feel worth it. And this is a nice, fun little, very doable project. Yields always a very cute cute set of gnomes. So here I am concentrating a little extra on that bottom, making sure it's going to be flat enough so that our gnome will stand and not be tippy. And now I'm back to the sides. Okay, so I'm feeling like I've gotten this poked enough. It's looking pretty good. There it is. You can also roll it at the end here when you feel like you've already gotten it felted pretty much the whole way. A little rolling sometimes smooths it out a bit more. And there it is. I'm going to check to make sure it stands. And again, if yours doesn't stand well, keep working on that bottom to flatten it out and get it standing. Alright, so now the next thing we're going to do is put on his beard. So this is the wool baby elephant. And so we need to pull off a piece like that that has a little point at the bottom, and you can work it with your hands a little bit. This piece was pretty good, so now I'm just going to stab in at the side just to catch the very edge. Just the very edge of that beard to get it attached, and then I'm also going to poke it at the top here to get it attached. And then we're going to pull off another piece a bit smaller. I might roll this just a tad. And this is going to go on one side, so think of this as like a long mustache coming down to join the beard. So again, I'm just poking in just to catch that edge and make sure it's going to stay attached, but I'm not poking the beard much at all because we want it to stay nice and fluffy, or at least I like mine to look more fluffy. So I'm just doing those edges, and then I'll get one more piece for the other side. And if your piece is too big, you can tear off a little bit. And if it was too small, you might just want to set it aside and get another one. So there is plenty of this color if you need to fix anything. Alright, so again, stab it in at the top, and then just a little bit from the side, both sides. And get this side a bit more. And you can kind of fiddle with it and make sure it's staying fluffy. Alright, so there is the beard. And again, if you want a different shaped beard, if you want to just do a mustache and no beard, it's very much open to your interpretation. So when I teach this in classes, they always look different. Alright, so here's our example gnome. So we want kind of a long nose. We're doing the nose next, and I have different examples here. So you could make your nose longer and thinner, or you could make your nose a little rounder and not as long. So it's kind of up to you. So to make the nose, we're going to do a small little roll, similar to how we shaped the gnomes, but just in miniature. So you need to tear into the milk and honey, that's what this color is called, the peach color, and make a little roll that is going to be the size of the nose. So roll that up till it feels like it's as big as you would like it to be. It'll shrink down a little bit when we poke it, but not a whole lot. So you want to start out with the roll about the shape and size that you want. And then I'm going to pick which one is going to be my rounded end, and then hold on the mat and start poking into that rounded end. So be very careful of your fingers here. Hopefully you've not poked yourself yet, but since this is a small piece, you do have to be very careful of those fingers. You could hold it with something else, such as a wood skewer or some kind of tweezers, something like that. So I'm just poking on the end and trying to keep it round. So I'm changing the angle of my needle and pushing the wool to have a round end, and then I'm going to go ahead and poke a little bit up farther on the nose. So you don't need to stab in very far for this, so just short little stabs, more gently poking with the short little stabs and gradually shaping it again until it's looking how you want. There's also plenty of this color, so if you make a nose that you don't like, you can remake it. There, I'm rolling it a bit again. That helps to smooth it out and to shape it a little bit as well. And then I'm going to keep going just a little bit. We want this to be nice and firm again, not still fuzzy, but firm and all compacted there. So there is my nose. You see I didn't do anything to the top of it again because that's also going to be hidden under the hat. So to put it on, you just place it where you want it to go. And we're going to stab in at the top. So this part you do want to stab well in so it's nicely attached. So poke in farther, or more vigorously, with some oomph, and attach that nose. Now if it's sticking up, you could leave it sticking up if you want it to stick up, but if not, just stab in a few times, kind of catching the underside of the nose and stabbing it in through the beard there. And then it will stay put. So now we can be on to the hat. So I'm going to just get out our beeswax color and fold the edge over there. See, I folded the edge. That's going to give us just a nicer edge for our hat. And now I'm going to place it over the nose and beard like that and start getting it into place. I'm just going to try and hold all that with the one hand while I poke in with the other hand and get it attached. So I'm poking in and I want to kind of catch the underside there of the hat and get it in place. And then I will also poke a little bit on the top, but I'm going on that line, kind of trying to catch that edge on the underside to poke it in. And now back to the top a little bit. So we're just getting it tacked on. We just want it to stay in place at this point on the bottom edge. And then we'll work on shaping the rest of it once we get all of this bottom edge attached to the gnome. Alright, so to just make sure it's down far enough that I'm covering up any of that core wool that might still be showing. And then I'm gonna keep that bottom edge folded and figure out how to overlap here. So there, like that. So now I've been almost all the way around and we've got it nicely overlapped. And I'm going to poke in on that edge a little bit more and then just up from the edge on the side so that this is staying in place. You see that angle that I'm going in, kind of catching the underside of that edge and stabbing it into the gnome. Alright. So all the way around that bottom edge. And then seeing little hairs and fibers I'm wanting to pull out. Okay, we're almost to where we can start pulling the hat up, but I'm just going to be very sure it's going to stay in place there. A little more poking. Okay, so here it is, and now we're going to continue to overlap, but start to pull it up a little bit and around. So there, I'm going to poke where I just put it, where it's overlapping the first layer. And again, we're poking more gently on the hat, so we want it to stay a little more fluffy and not be as compacted. Now I'm going to pull this up here. So this is our point, so we can't have too much wool up there. We won't get a nice point. I'm still going to bring the rest around. So still overlapping. So once I have kind of that next part in place, I'm going to poke a little bit more to hold it there. So we do it gradually up from the bottom of the hat. Now I'm about to the halfway point, and then I can keep folding it around. And we may need to take off even a bit more of that wool up there because we want it to be tapering to a point. I'm folding around and then poking as I go. So we're just poking enough to hold it in place. I want it still to stay kind of fluffy, looking more like fabric for the hat. So poking that in place. And we're getting a little bit more of a point up at the top. So now that it's at this point, I'm going to take it between my hands and roll it a bit. So this may seem a bit tricky, but you just roll it a little. It gives you that nice point at the top and helps to smooth out the rest of the hat. And now I'm going to go back and poke more. So we just need a little bit more shaping, but again, not a lot. We're leaving it not very well felted, but it's a decoration, so it doesn't need to be super hardened. So I'm doing a little bit more up towards the point here, and then I may roll it again. Roll it again just to work on that point. It's looking pretty good. I just want to show you on one of my finished ones. I do like to shape the hat now a little bit more. You can see it has some indents and kind of gives it a little more interesting character to shape it a little bit more. So I work with the parts that are already kind of naturally wanting to go in, and then I want it to stay kind of even, so I'm going to then make an indent on the other side. So I don't want my hat folding over. I really like to let it kind of be straight, but have these little indents and little interesting areas. But you could fold it all the way over. You could do many things with your hat shaping. And again, when I teach classes, everyone makes their gnomes a little different, and they come up with some very fun hat ideas. We had people put balls on the top, fold them completely over, have a bigger hat or a smaller hat. So it's really up to you how you want that to look. That's just how I like to do mine. So I'm going to say this gnome is looking pretty well finished. You can look again at the rest of your gnome once your hat is on and make any final adjustments or fixes. You can always keep poking if you see any areas that need it. You can just go back over wherever might need a little extra work. And there I'm tucking the beard up into the hat a bit more, and sometimes on the side here it seems to need a bit more poking. It's puckering a little. So that is the final step, is just to go back over any parts that you want to smooth out more, or do any little fixes. And it's hard to see on the video what I'm even exactly working on, but I'm always seeing little parts that I just want to make a little bit better. Alright, but we can call this gnome finished. I like the way that one turned out. Hopefully you like the way that yours turned out. And then you'll just follow these same steps to make your other gnomes. So I will go ahead and show you one more thing for your small gnome to make your nose a little bit more round. So you'll tear in, and you don't need quite as wide of a strip. You need a pretty narrow little strip of wool for a rounded nose. And you'll want to roll it perhaps a little bit more than we did before and put more wool on there so that it can be more rounded. There it is. And I could even tear off a bit. If it's too long and you don't need all of that wool, you can always tear off a bit. So here's the part that I want to try and make very round. So I'm just poking in, again, watch those other fingers. And I'm just varying the angle of my needle, always thinking about how I can round out that little nose shape. So we want to poke into it kind of from each side, every direction, and get it rounded. And again, if you want to hold it with something else rather than your other hand, if you find that you're prone to poking yourself, please do try other ways of holding. For some reason, I am just very good at not poking myself now, so I don't know if it's practice or what, but there's our nose. Finished enough, and so I've worked ahead and gotten my shorter gnome here. So when you're putting on a rounded nose, instead of attaching it with it sticking down like that, you just want to attach it in a way that just that rounded part is going to stick right out there. So move the upper part of the nose a little farther back, and all that's going to get covered up by the hat. And there would be the example of how to do a shorter, more rounded nose. And then when you put on the hat, here's what it will look like. And it'll just stick right out there. So other than that, the process is really very much the same, so we're not going to do the other two on the video. You can rewatch if you need to. And here is how my set have turned out. So hopefully you like the way that yours are looking and you're enjoying this project. So if you are in need of any other kits or felting supplies, I hope you'll come visit us at feltedsky.com. And we'd love to hear any comments or questions or see pictures of your gnomes, so you can contact us there on the website. And as always, happy felting!